Hello everyone, it's Jamal Thomas. Welcome to the Progressive Soapbox. So, I have a question. Before we, and actually let me make sure this is up. I always like to check. I don't want to get X, all the way in and it's not working. And good. Make sure here it's not working. And yes, it's working. So, before we go to the next object, the next shiny object, they're dangling it in front of us, and I'm talking about mainstream media. Before we, the new ball that's thrown out, the new football, the new trinket, the new person we're talking about, the new interesting thing that all of us are supposed to invest our attention into. Before we go do that, can we just be honest and ask a very simple question to mainstream media? What happened to the Russian hacking narrative? Where did it go? Where did it go? For 8 months. 8 months. We've been inundated with Russia hacked us, Russia hacked us, Russia hacked us, Russia touched Lady Liberty inappropriately. You had Democrats screaming an attack by Russia that never took place, that wasn't indeed a hack. That attack that never took place, that invisible attack. Should we respond to that militarily? This is what Democrats were talking about. Maxine Waters was losing her goddamn mind. Almost got into a fight with Michael Tracy. It's an amazing video to watch. Now, Michael Tracy act like one of those basketball players when you just barely touch me, just because it was, oh my God. Fair enough. But she was being immensely belligerent. Democrats have screamed Russia at the top of their lungs. But understand, Democrats is a political party. Their job, to some degree, is to obfuscate. Meaning, it's not their job per se, but that's what you would expect. Meaning, if you lose to that extent, you lose 1,000 seats. That's immensely embarrassing. But you dot it off with losing to reality show hosts. A maniac with another group of maniacs that have full control over the political apparatus in the United States government and in most state legislatures. Understand the Democrats' reasons for obfuscating, for lying through their teeth, for not wanting to have the conversation about why they lost 15 million people and why they lose so much. I get that. That's embarrassing. I get that. But is it media's responsibility to toe the water for the Democratic Party? Now, I understand that we have an established order of things. It's an establishment. These groups, meaning political and media, are in alignment to some degree. And being in alignment, they do toe certain narratives because many of the people in the media, A, want access, and B, let's be honest, they're funded by similar people. Not to mention they want to put asses in seats. That's problematic. The philosophical role of the media is supposed to give us information to allow us to make decisions. The information that the media gives us should be relevant to us. Russia hacked us. Wasn't relevant to us because Russia didn't hack us. Any degree of going into the evidence itself would have came up with the conclusion of Russia didn't hack us. The veterans intelligence professionals said it was physically impossible. People who were in the industry itself and made point of saying, look, they can look at our analysis and hear independent studies that show this is bogus. It starts running in the mainstream media outlets. The Nation, RT runs it. If I'm not mistaken, Bloomberg runs the story. Russian hacking is a hoax. You start seeing in networks like TYT, I think, started just bubbling up. I've been screaming that this was a hoax for 5 months. Actually, that's too strong. I made the point that I don't care if Russia hacked us or not because it's irrelevant to our political process. I don't believe Russia hacked us. I think it's bogus because I think the Democrats want to obfuscate. And they tell us the information that shows that they hacked us. I'm not going to believe it. That was my position. As things went on, my position started to harden in the sense of these guys are full of it. These guys are full of it. Julian Assange came out saying, yes, this is bogus. We didn't get it from Russia. This is bogus. Julian Assange injects that it was a leak and not a hack. In one of his interviews, I remember the interview itself where he injects Seth Rich into the conversation. Now, media for the last 8 months have been screaming that any talk of this being a leak and not a hack was conspiracy theory. Oh, these groups, these left-wingers are pushing these conspiracy theories. These right-wingers are pushing these conspiracy theories. They're conspiracy theories. They just hate Hillary Clinton. It wasn't that people were pushing conspiracy theories. It wasn't that they just hated Hillary Clinton. The narrative didn't make sense. The narrative didn't make sense. Even under the best premise, meaning, let's say it was a hack, which it wasn't. Let's say it was. Information was released showing that the DNC cheated Bernie Sanders. Not just cheated Bernie Sanders, it showed the Clinton Foundation to be a slush fund. If the media's and Hillary Clinton's narrative is correct, the public looked at that and recoiled in horror. It was pertinent information, if they're right. If you're saying it's a hack, that information was released. The public made a decision based on that information, and the information was true. It wasn't like they lied about you. That's the best case scenario. But that's not the scenario. The scenario is it was leaked. It was leaked. It was physically impossible for it to be hacked. What is the job of mainstream media? What is your job? I have to ask the question. Is your job to carry water for the two-party system? Is your job to carry water for the Democratic Party? And why? You have to explain to me. Why are you so casual in accepting the premise of the government? Does mainstream media, the people who are looking at the assessment, meaning, did they know the people in media, CNN, Washington Post, New York Times, all these media outlets, all of these multi-million-dollar media outlets with these vast resources to get information, to put themselves in all sorts of places around the world, did these people know that an assessment was just an opinion and that the FBI never actually looked at the Democrats' servers? Did they know that Democrats had a vested interest in obfuscating and kicking up dust because they didn't necessarily want to deal with the vagaries and the problems of their particular party and why they lost to such an epic, mind-blowing, and embarrassing extent? What is the job of media that rings out? Is media to be held accountable when media fucks up on a massive fucking level? Again! It's not like this is the first time media has failed. Media consistently fails. The run-up to Iraq war, they killed 1 million Iraqis. The New York Times, Washington Post was publishing stories that they had weapons of mass destruction in Iraq, parroting Dick Cheney. Where were the investigators? Where were people who were looking at the government skeptically when they were bringing up these stories about, oh my God, Saddam Hussein is doing this, Saddam Hussein is doing that, he has weapons, and those weapons may attack us? Where's the skepticism after getting it so wrong on 9/11? Meaning Saddam Hussein and weapons of mass destruction. Where's the skepticism? After getting it so wrong, millions of people died, not to mention 3,000 Americans, and we destabilized an entire region. Before we kick over another country, before we destroy government, before we kill 1 million people, shouldn't there be some level of skepticism in the story that the government is running with? This time it wasn't Iraq, it was a nuclear power nation. And the media apparatus in our particular country has decided that some other nation, a nuclear power nation, attacked us, digging into the worst fears of this kind of red baiting, this McCarthyism done by the Democratic Party. Is there accountability? And is the media just going to jump to the next story, the next shiny object, the next shiny ball, without discussing their massive failure? They passed sanctions on Russia. What did they do? At the very least, if you're going to say, hey, all of this stuff was going on with Russia for the past 8 months, we've said that Russia hacked us and all this good stuff, but now we're going to go into the next story because our wheels are falling off of our story. The wheels have come completely off. So we're going to pretend as if we weren't talking about this for 8 months. We weren't talking about poverty. We weren't talking about income inequality. We weren't talking about what were the factors that got Donald Trump elected. just how much of a goblin he was. We weren't talking about anything of substance. And mind you, the single payer thing came up, but ultimately the main conversation that's been taking place in this country is, oh my God, Donald Trump is horrible. Oh my God, Donald Trump is a bumbling idiot. Oh my God, Donald Trump is a racist and a fascist. He's illegitimate, and the Russian government hacked us in order to get Donald Trump in office. So much so that Bernie Sanders is out there bashing the Russian government. What did they do? What did they do? What did they do that we don't do? We kicked over a country to kill 1 million people, and we're complaining about somebody, quote unquote, hacking us, which again didn't take place. Those files were leaked. They weren't hacked. At the very least, shouldn't mainstream media deal with the independent investigation that came out showing that they were wrong for 8 months? Shouldn't that be a part of the process? The Democratic Party didn't want to have an autopsy. Should the mainstream media have an autopsy? Shouldn't they had an autopsy after they killed or got 1 million people killed in a run-up to a war that they weren't skeptical about? What am I missing? What am I missing? They failed on a massive fucking level. Again. And I'm saying they failed again because of a story that was made up by Hillary Clinton after being continuously asked why she lost the reality show host, and she didn't necessarily want to take the blame for herself, gets injected into the media. Now, I understand the self-serving narrative of Hillary Clinton. Fair enough, she lost the reality show host. That's probably the most embarrassing thing on the planet. I would imagine that that election night, that president or that candidate, after losing, didn't come out and give her a farewell speech. Mitt Romney would have been attacked viciously if Mitt Romney didn't come out and give his concession speech. But whatever. She didn't come out and give her concession speech. She came out the next day, gave her concession speech, looking pretty contrite. I would imagine it hurt miserably. A ham sandwich could have beat Donald Trump. Hillary Clinton couldn't. I understand her motives. What is the motives of media? What's the excuse that media is using to cover from their failure? Again. I don't expect the Democrats to come back and say, okay, you're right, it wasn't a hack. But as media, doesn't media have an obligation to some level of honesty when what they've been saying was so factually and obviously wrong? Are they going to be held to account? Do they have enough integrity to hold themselves to account that says, you're right, we were wrong? Calling people conspiracy theory for telling the truth was a problem and wrong. We were pushing fake news for 8 months, and we were wrong. I'm sorry, we failed again. These are the words that I want to hear coming out of mainstream media's mouth. I want to hear Chuck Todd, Mr. Oblivious, saying those words. I want to see those words under "Democracy dies in our darkness" in the New York Times. I want to see them under those pages of the New York Times. A kumbaya, I'm sorry we failed again. I'm sorry we failed again. Look, and I'm going to end this because I don't want to get it too long. I have another video coming up after this where we can chat a little bit. The media's responsibility. The world is not set up the way you think the world is set up. Meaning, you may have institutions that have certain things that they want to accomplish, certain things that they want to do, at the very least, certain things that they espouse, that they say they're going to do. Our mission statement is this. There's a such thing as a mission statement in the real world. In the real world, people function based upon the incentives that are driving them. Sometimes they don't necessarily have a choice but to go with the current, but ultimately, they're functioning within a box. Media is also functioning within a box. Just because the United States tries to give this impression that we don't have state-run media, it still functions in the same way. When you have a war going on, you would notice that the media outlets, for the most part, toe the same line. Fox News, CNN, MSNBC, all for the most part agree on the basics of things, but within a certain degrees, they agree on the system the way it is. Media, its role, it's a profit-making enterprise. Its job is to put asses in seats. That media outlet, however, is in no way bringing in as much cash as the other things that are owned by those conglomerates. If I wanted to get a story out that in no way adversely affected my other businesses, yes, I would own a media outlet, and I would give you information to make you think you were getting actual stories and news and advice and all this other good stuff. You have a billion things that you can talk about. I am giving you a very small sliver, and that sliver in no way is going to adversely affect me. That's the media. It's not about what you need. It's not about even the best things for you to know. It's not about even information that's in your best interest. It's about the narratives that they create. Russia hacked us was a narrative. There was no reality to it. It was a leak, not a hack. It was fake news. Anybody who said, though, that it was a leak was pushing fake news. Now imagine the situation where Google comes out and says, we're going to hide anything where anybody is saying that this was a leak, not a hack. I'm sorry, a hack, not a leak. Meaning Google goes with this idea of the fake news that the media is pushing, saying this is reality, so we're just going to make up a reality that doesn't necessarily conform to actual reality. This is why you don't hide information. This is why you don't hide information. This is why you don't scrub the internet of information that you don't particularly like. They were wrong. The media outlets were wrong. Own it. They need to own it. They need to be accountable to something. They got 1 million people killed in Iraq. At the very least, going with this idea of passing sanctions on a government that did nothing to us is problematic. They were fomenting a war with a nuclear power nation. And they went so far as to pass sanctions, tying Donald Trump's hands up in those sanctions. I don't like Donald Trump, but at the same token, I don't think he would pass sanctions on Russia. That was the Democrats pushing it. But ultimately, it was mainstream media that put this garbage into the light of day. I'll leave it at that. Media failed miserably. They should account for their miserable failure. I'll leave it at that. Alright guys, if you enjoy the content, feel free to share, write, subscribe, and of course, you can always support the work through PayPal or Patreon. I'm going to have another video coming up after this, and we can talk a little bit then. Thanks guys.